Shalom, everyone. I hope you're doing well and ready for another relaxing, restful, and healing Shabbat. I wanted to share a perspective on a law in the Torah, which tells us that we have to pay attention. Within the context of the laws of returning lost objects, the Torah says that it's not only that one has to return the lost object, that one's not allowed to ignore the object itself. The verse says, Lo tireh et shor achicha vet sion nidachim, that if you see your brother's ox or sheep wandering astray, v'hita lamta mehem, you shouldn't ignore their property, but rather go out of your way. It's not just that one has to, if one chances upon a lost object, one has to return it, but you're not allowed to ignore it, not allowed to walk past and miss this opportunity to do a mitzvah. And the Talmud in Tractate Bava Metzia says that there are certain categories that are exempt from this. There are certain people who do not have to go out of their way to return a lost object. One example that the Talmud offers is a kohen beveit hakvarot, is that of a kohen in a cemetery. And kohanim are prohibited from entering cemeteries, and so if a kohen is walking past a cemetery, not in the cemetery, and sees a lost object that is in the cemetery, the kohen obviously doesn't have to enter the cemetery in order to retrieve that object. Another example is zaken ve'eno lefi chvodo, that for an elderly person for whom bending over perhaps and picking up the object would diminish their dignity, their sense of dignity, and therefore the Torah says that person is exempt. A sage, someone who has a great level of dignity and respect, would also be exempt from bending over and retrieving the lost object. There's really a remarkable story told about Rabbi Akiva Eger, the great scholar, how he was walking through the streets of Warsaw, kind of walking around lost, looking at doors, looking at addresses, and his students came upon him and said, Rebbe, you're the greatest scholar of the generation. You have all this. Why are you wandering around? Why are you wandering around the streets? And he said to him, well, I was visiting Warsaw, and I was looking for a relative. I think I have a cousin who lives here. I was just looking for where they live. And they say, Rebbe, but isn't it beneath your honor to look for that relative? They should come looking for you. Why are you looking for them? And he said, because the Torah says the word v'hita lamta, that you should ignore in two different contexts. One has to do with returning lost objects, and the other is from the Haftorah from Yom Kippur, from the 58th chapter of Isaiah, where the Torah says, speaking the prophecy that God says that what does God desire? Not these empty fasts, these empty rituals, but rather God desires halo paros lera'ev lachmecha, that you share the bread with the hungry. V'aniyim rudim tavivait, and take the wretched poor into your home. Ki tireh arom v'chisi, so when you see the naked, clothe them. Omib sarcha lo titalem, and do not ignore your own kin. The Torah says do not ignore twice. One connected to returning lost objects, and the other connected, don't ignore your own kin, don't ignore your own family. And Rabbi Akiva Eger says the Talmud gives an exemption to Torah scholars for only one of those, that the Torah scholar doesn't have to go out of his or her way to retrieve a lost object, but when it comes to family, there's no exemption from the dignity of a scholar is too great to pay attention to the needs of the family, but rather nothing, no honor would exempt one from that responsibility. It's a very powerful lesson in the centrality of family and that of position, that of power. That power and dignity and honor and place in community allows one to be exempt from doing something beneath dignity in terms of going over and retrieving something that was lost or that someone needs. But when it comes to family, they always have to be, no one's dignity removes them from the sense of belonging to a family and having responsibilities to family. I think this message of not ignoring, the fact that one is not allowed to ignore, in normal cases, without these exemptions, one is not allowed to ignore a lost object, means that we have to pay attention. And it means that the Torah is telling us to walk through life with our eyes open and to understand the problems around us and to look for ways in which we can help. It's a very powerful lesson. I think in particular in these times, there are so many problems that are there. Many have been brought to the fore. We're talking about certainly in the media, certainly we're reading about, we're watching, whatever it is. And the Torah says, I believe, V'hitalamta, that one is not allowed to ignore these issues. It doesn't mean that everyone has to have a strong opinion. It doesn't mean that everyone has to write and has to blog and has to post about it, but rather it simply means that being a citizen of this world means that we have to be aware of the challenges around us, and to everyone to think about what their own role is in terms of bringing about a better solution and a brighter future. I wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom.
In this time of, perhaps you can look at it as great disturbance to our regular life, what we do is we tend to focus on what has been taken away from us, the things that we are accustomed to, that we can no longer perform, can no longer be, can no longer do. But perhaps on Shabbat, it's time to reflect on what we have, all the goodness which we have in our life. And I want to share the following song, Shabbat song, with you. And it's traditionally sung both either Friday night or Shabbat morning, because I think of the positive message that it imbues. What I want to share with you, though, is perhaps a new tune. It is an Irish jig. It's a lesser known tune, but I think it's upbeat, and I would like to sing that and share it with you and bring it to your Shabbat spirit. Tzur mishalach alanu baruch hu emunai savanu ve'otaranu kidvara Hashem hazan et olamo roheinu avinu achalnu et lachmo ve'yeheinu shatinu al ken nodel lishmo unhallelo befinu amarnu ve'aninu en kadosh kadoshem tzur mishalach alanu baruch hu emunai savanu ve'otaranu kidvara Hashem בשיר וקול תודה נברך לאלוהינו על ארץ חמדה טובה שהנחיל על אבותינו מזון וצידה השביע לנפשנו חסדו גבר עלינו ואמת השם צור משלח לנו פרחו אמוני שבענו והותרנו כדבר השם רחם בחסדך על עמך צורנו, על ציון משכן כבודך, סבול בית תפארתנו, בן דוד עבדך יבוא ויגלנו, רוח אפינו משיח השם, צור משלח לנו, פרחו אמוני, שבענו והותרנו, כדבר השם. ייבנה המקדש, עיר ציון תמלא, ושם נשיר שיר חדש, וברננה נעלה. הרחמנן נקדש, יתברך ויתעלה, על כוס יין מלא, כברכת השם, צור משלח לנו, פרחו אמוני, שבענו והותרנו, כי דבר השם. I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom.